And Nathan, you mentioned Beijing and Moscow. What does it mean for China, really?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's quite an incredible bill. I really encourage any China watchers to really read it, at least the executive summary, because not only does it talk about new weapon systems, for example, more ships for the Pacific, but also there are specific things in this bill that target China in the policy realm as well. Let's take a look.
At the rim of the Pacific exercises this year, the largest multilateral naval exercises in the world, Chinese ships were conspicuously absent. After two successful previous appearances, China was disinvited by the US over its activities in the South China Sea. And under the 2019 Defense Authorization Act, China would be officially banned from those exercises. And there are other measures too. Plans for strengthening the US-Taiwan military relationship will be drawn up. An annual report on China's so-called malign activities in the South China Sea, a ban on the use by the US military of equipment made by Chinese firms Huawei and ZTE, an overhaul of investment rules on national security grounds, and cutting the budget for Chinese learning at US universities that house China's state-backed Confucius Institutes.
So this is broad-based, the suspicion of China and this sense of a threat from China, and to me that's a remarkable thing about this bill.
The US focus on China as a competitor comes as the US armed forces are downgrading the fight against terrorism and focusing more on the Asia-Pacific. The US Defense Secretary recently visited his counterparts in China and stressed the need for cooperation, but not before criticizing Chinese actions at a key regional security conference. This US Defense Act also provides more money to forge closer defense relationships with other nations like India and Sri Lanka. This year saw the first visit of a US aircraft carrier to Vietnam since the end of the Vietnam War. All over the Indo-Pacific, as the US now labels the region, the US is increasing its already overwhelming superiority.
What strikes me about this bill is, as you said, the diversity of provisions that deal with China and the scope. It's not simply authorizing more planes and ships to be built, which it does, but it also directs reporting requirements on issues like influence operations and espionage.
And China is not alone. Russia, too, is targeted in this spending bill, with plans for a permanent US presence in neighboring Poland, and NATO ally Turkey will be denied access to the new F-35 fighter jet, at least for now.
And as part of the Pentagon's focus on China, this Defense Act also looks for another aircraft carrier to add to the US fleet. In fact, in total, about 46 new ships are planned for the US Navy over the next 5 years. And here in the US, it's been incredible. There's been little opposition for this $700 billion budget, for the largest ever, basically, in the Pentagon's history. This year's defense spending request made its way through the US Congress far quicker than usual. There is a lot of joint support for this increase in military spending. By the way, we can just have a little look now at US President Trump. He's still at Fort Drum. He hasn't signed that bill right now, but let's just take a little listen to the US Commander-in-Chief as he lays out his rationale for it.
And Apache helicopters, finest in the world, for the Army National Guard. 77 F-35 Joint Strike Fighters, you know, that's stealth. I talked to a couple of pilots, great pilots. I said, how are they? They said they're hard to beat because you can't see them. It's always hard to beat the enemy when you can't see it. The greatest in the world. Full funding for the B-21 Raider bomber program, 13 new Battle Force ships.
And that was the US President there talking about the F-35, which many of you know is the new stealthy fighter for the 21st century. It's cost about $1 trillion to develop, very controversial across the world because it is so expensive. Also, a lot of allies resisting that expense, although the rollout is continuing, and a lot of debate in military circles about whether it was worth it. But, you know, Astier, when you're spending $717 billion a year on the military, maybe you can throw the odd trillion around on a long-term fighter project.
All right, we'll leave it there. Nathan King, thank you.